Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, Muriel Talks. As you can see today, I'm wearing my sweatshirt because I want to discuss about the news event of the death of George Floyd. As everyone, this information has been shocking and devastating for me. He was murdered by an act of racism against black in US. And today, even if what happened was terrible, I can also see positive effects in how the world have reacted to that news. There are bad effects, but there are also positive effects. For example, I've noticed that it's not only black people that reacted, white also joined, many other races join in this fight against racism. And this is very positive because I think some change will happen in the next future, and maybe such an act will never ever repeat itself again. Actually, this is my wish. But as I'm talking about racism, in this video I will mention some of the cases that I faced myself as I'm a black person living in Europe. First of all, I will mention about France, then UK, and also some cases that happened to me when I was younger in Africa, even though in Africa it wasn't as bad. And all of what happened to me is not as bad as what happened in US and what is still happening in US. Why? Because even though it has been over 100 years that slavery has been abolished in the US and segregation is no more part of their lives, we can still notice the effect in the US society. They are still not together. Segregation is still there, even if not official. So that is why what is happening in the US is terrible. And I wish and I pray that through those events, in the next future, black men in US, black women in US will have the same rights and the same privilege than the white community, that they will be able to breathe in peace in US with their white brothers. So let me mention some of the cases I faced in France. When I arrived in France in 2007, I remembered the next day after my arrival, I was with one of my cousins that arrived the same day with me for our studies. And we went with my auntie to a bank. She wanted to withdraw some money. So we were waiting for her outside the bank. And while waiting for her, some policemen spot us in the people standing in front of that bank to ask about our papers. And this is something very common in France. Wherever there is a gathering, whether in the tube or in any public places, where the policemen would come, they would always spot black people to request for their papers. This is actually unruly and against the law because they choose who to ask the papers based on the skin color or the origins, which should not be. And actually, for all the years that I've stayed in France, it has been 8 years, I always will go out with my papers on me because I never know when I can come across a police officer that will ask for my papers. This became a second lifestyle. I actually break with that lifestyle when I came in UK. It took me some time, and even till now I still have my papers in my purse, even if I don't bother anymore about always having them on me when I go out. But in UK, they don't ask people for papers anywhere, everywhere, the way they do in France. So I started to feel free to just go out without thinking, oh, where are my papers? So yes, this is something I can recall about France that is an act of racism. But more so, even though I can't call it racism, I face ideas that are a bit racist in France. For example, at uni, I remembered we had a video shared in the English class. That video was about a Kenyan runner, an Olympic runner. So they were showing the house of that famous Kenyan, and I heard some of them whispering that actually this house can't be in Africa. The house was looking too good for it to be in Africa in their eyes. And actually the house wasn't that great. It was just a normal house. Actually, there was no wall surrounding it, or there was no big cars inside the compound. There was even no swimming pool. So for me, it was just a normal common house. But they were saying that actually this couldn't be in Africa. I didn't say anything about it, but later on I mentioned what I heard to one of my friends who was a French white girl. She was curious and she actually asked me if it was common for us to have such houses in Africa. And I actually told her that actually it's a very common thing, and that that house wasn't among the biggest of what we have in Africa. So it's out of ignorance, but it's very sad, it's very weird. Like, someone don't feel comfortable, particularly us African, we don't feel comfortable when we hear such kind of ideas. And there have been several occasions that I will not mention here for the sake of time, but I can mention that one. Also, one thing about me is that I wasn't born in Europe. I grew up in Africa, as I mentioned in my previous videos. And because I grew up in Africa, I never faced racism that much when I was small, as many of the black people living in Europe. What do I mean? I have a friend in France who have a son who was then only 4 or 5 years old. And even at this tender age, he was facing racism from his friends at school. Of course, it wasn't initiated by the friends. It was the parents that were giving ideas. They would say things to him that were racist, like, your mom is ugly because she's black. Or even he has a small girl that he calls his lover, and she was a white girl. And she will always tell him that when they will grow up, she will never marry him. Of course, at such a tender age, you wonder why they are talking about marriage. But yes, she will say that she will never marry him because he is black. So imagine for such a child to grow up all his life thinking that his skin color is an issue. What do you expect from such a person? So this is not the only cases. There is also racism when it comes to job research. I know for facts that in France, depending on your name or your skin color, they might not recruit you. And it's not just rumor. I even had a case where the person just switched his name. He had two names. He switched the name he used on his CV. He didn't change anything else on that CV. And the same company that told him that the job was no more available called him and actually hired him, not knowing that it was the same person. So just imagine, this is what people have been living with for years. So it's a huge load on them. More so, if I have to talk about UK, in UK, of course, I mentioned I don't feel any racism when it comes to police officers or even to job opportunities, even if there is. But I can mention it from the population. I remember when I entered my first apartment. It was a shared house, and one of my neighbor didn't like me parking my car in front of her house. And one day she even threatened me of putting nails to damage my tires. Of course, I told her that if ever she does, I will report her to the police. But funny enough, one day she took a parcel for me as I wasn't around. Maybe she thought it wasn't me because my name, Muriel Marie Wright, doesn't sound African at all. So when I went to take my parcel to her house, she was a bit surprised that I was the one to take that parcel. And from then, she never disturbed me anymore. Actually, she would even greet me. Her attitude towards me completely changed. Surely she thought I was British. So that are some cases that I have faced when in Europe. But when in Africa, even if I never faced any direct act of racism, I can recall a funny story. It was funny for us then, about one of our classmates that joined us during the year in Ghana. When she came, she had two pencil cases. There was one that she would always display on her table, and another one where she would keep only the color pencils that she will always hide in her school bag. She would just bring it out when she needs to pick up something from it, then and automatically put it back in that bag. On her pencil cases, her old schoolmates from France wrote some words of farewell. So the first one, we will always have access to it. We will read it. She will never say anything about it. But whenever we will try to know about what was written on the second one, she will always make sure we will not read it. And we are always wondering why. So one day, unknown to her knowledge, we went back to the class during one of our break time. And we looked for that pencil case. When we took the pencil case, what we find on it was very funny, because they were wishing her farewell, saying that she should be careful about the lions, that she should be careful not to be bitten by serpents or scorpions, that they hope that her village house, I don't know the proper name in English, but her village house will have electricity. Actually, it's like if they thought that Africans were living in the bush with some small villages. That's the idea they had about Africa, like my schoolmates when I was at uni. Just imagine. So yeah, this is the kind of racism I came about and I'm aware of till now in Europe. It's not as bad as US, but for someone to grow up in this type of atmosphere, you can imagine the anger they have. I am not angry, and I don't think anger is the solution, but I can understand where they are coming from. And what I can say is that we all have a role to play. Not only the black people, but the white, the Chinese, the Indians, whatever race you are, even if you are from another planet, we all need to change our mindset when it comes to race. We need to be able to love each other. real love, pure love. We have to learn to know each other and not to reject each other. We will never grow in peace together if we don't stop those ideas and those judgments about others just based on their race or their skin color. So this is the message I wanted to pass across. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share. See you next time. Bye.